off? I'm back with insane content! And today we're gonna do a brake fluid flush and replace the stock brake lines with steel braided brake lines. Is it because I track the car a lot? Or is it to provide for more content for my 392 subscribers? So let's get it done!
Alright, so you'll be needing a jack and a jack stand, a brake fluid bleeder kit, a catch can, a fluid transfer pump, brake fluid. As you can see, I went with Moto's RBF 600 as it's both good for street use and track use. Steel braided brake lines, I went for the Goodridge brake lines. I really like the looks and quality of them, and I'll put a link to the brake lines in the description below. Tools to get the wheels on and off, several open end wrenches, brake cleaner, penetration oil, and a drain pan. Alright, so first we're going to get the car in the air to remove the wheels. First loosen the wheel nuts, jack the car up, put a jack stand under there, and remove the wheels all together. Alright, so as you can see, this allows access to the brake lines. We're going to start at the rear. As things can get a bit messy, let's first put the drain pan under there. Alright, so we start by spraying some penetration oil on the nuts at the end of the hard brake line, as you do not want to break these. Then grab a 11mm open end wrench and carefully undo the nut on top of the brake line. Once loose, simply pull out the brake line. Then grab a 14mm open end wrench and undo the other end of the brake line. You can then simply remove it all together by twisting the brake line. Make sure to let it drip in the drain pan. Alright, so now it's time for the steel braided brake line. Simply twist the brake line in the caliper like you undid the old brake line and tighten it with a 13mm open end wrench. Then go ahead and connect the other end with the hard brake line and tighten the nut of the hard brake line. Then go ahead and use some brake cleaner to clean off any residual brake fluid. It's very nasty stuff. Make sure everything is clean and dry, and that's one brake line installed. Alright, so now the brake line's at the front of the car. So now we start by removing this clip holding down the brake line. This actually took me some time as it was quite stuck on there, and it totally didn't infuriate me. Look at its stupid face. So the rest of the steps for the front brake lines are the same as the rear brake lines as just instructed, so I'll just shut up for a bit and let you enjoy the music. So there's our front brake line installed. Now to do the same thing on the other side of the car. Alright, so now that the brake lines are installed, we're going to go ahead and do the now necessary brake fluid flush. Grab a 10mm wrench and remove the panel hiding the brake master cylinder and undo the cap of the brake fluid reservoir. Carefully remove the small strainer and connect the brake fluid bleeder kit to the reservoir. Once everything is connected properly, we're going to put some pressure on the system by cranking up to around 10 psi. Once under pressure, we're going to go ahead and check for leaks and let it sit for a couple of minutes to see if the pressure remains steady. So after a couple of minutes, this was the case, so now we're going to release the pressure and disconnect the kit. So now it's time to get as much old brake fluid out of the reservoir by using the fluid transfer pump. As I replaced the brake lines, a lot has already dripped out through the open hard brake lines. Make sure, however, that the reservoir doesn't run dry, as you do not want to get any air in the system. This is how much I got out of it. So now we're going to fill the brake fluid bleeder kit with the new brake fluid. Take note of the transparent color of the new brake fluid and the yellow color of the fluid coming out of the car. So I almost put a whole liter of brake fluid in there. Make sure to save some to possibly fill up the brake fluid reservoir at the end if necessary. So then it's a matter of connecting the brake fluid bleeder kit to the reservoir again and to pump it up to around 15 psi. Give it a couple of minutes to check if the pressure remains stable. If the pressure remains stable, as it did here, it's time to bleed the brakes. So first remove the dust cap of the brake bleed nipple and hurt your hand in the process before connecting the tube of the catch can to the bleed nipple. Note that you start out at the caliper the furthest away from the brake master cylinder, being the rear passenger side, and work your way closer to the brake master cylinder. Once connected, open up the bleed nipple with the 11mm open end wrench and undo it until the fluid starts to flow out of the bleed nipple, as you can see here. Here you can see some bubbles escaping the system. That's generally what you want to see. So here you can clearly see that the old yellow fluid is no longer in this brake line and the fluid has turned transparent, being the new fluid. So once you no longer see any bubbles escaping the system and you can clearly see that the old fluid is flushed out, it's time to close the bleed nipple. Get your 11mm open end wrench and tighten it back down. And don't forget to put the dust cap back on. That's one caliper done. So before doing the rear driver's side next, go ahead and check if you still have enough pressure. Then simply repeat the steps until, again, no more old fluid and bubbles are present. So now for the front brakes. The third caliper will be the one on the front passenger side. Note that this caliper has two bleeding nipples and we start out with the one, you guessed it, the furthest away from the brake master cylinder. So then repeat the steps as done in the rear calipers. So remove the dust cap, connect the tube of the catch can, open up the bleed nipple, wait for the old fluid and bubbles to disappear, close the bleed nipple again, remove the tube of the catch can and put the dust cap back on. And as mentioned, note that you would also need to do this on the second bleed nipple of the front calipers. So once you've done the other front caliper as well, it's time to release the pressure of the bleeder kit, remove it all together, top up the brake fluid reservoir if necessary, and put the cap and panel back in their place.
Alright guys, so it's actually the next day as it was getting a bit dark yesterday. So after everything was done correctly, obviously, I first updated the service history of the car. Alright, so then I went to test the brakes, and they're very hard and firm, as I will now demonstrate by this non-edited footage. Crazy good brakes. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you next time!